winter had always been my sanctuary. While others dreaded the cold, I thrived in it. The crisp air, the dazzling holiday lights, and most of all, my yearly tradition of crafting an extraordinary snowman. But these weren't just ordinary snowmen. I had built ice knights, snow dragons, even a life-sized Yeti once. Every year, kids in the neighborhood took pictures, families admired my work, and for a brief moment, it made our quiet town of Maplewood Hills feel like a true community. That was until Eleanor Whitmore decided to declare war on winter itself. Eleanor was the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood, a 55-year-old control freak who ran a fake HOA with an iron fist. She had no real authority, but that didn't stop her from issuing bogus fines, enforcing ridiculous rules, and terrorizing anyone who didn't bow to her made-up regulations. And this year, her latest enemy? My snowman. It started with one act of vandalism, then another, and another. She stomped, kicked, and even torched my creation with a hairdryer at midnight like some unhinged, snow-hating villain. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a snowman. This was war. And when it was over, Eleanor wouldn't just lose the battle. She'd lose everything. The first time my snowman was destroyed, I thought it was some random kids pulling a prank. But when I checked my security cameras, the truth sent my blood boiling. There she was, Eleanor Whitmore, marching onto my lawn at 11:47 p.m., wrapped in her signature leopard print robe, slippers shuffling through the snow. With the precision of a trained assassin, she delivered a brutal soccer kick straight to my snowman's head, sending it flying into the darkness. But she didn't stop there. Oh no. She ripped off the arms, stomped the body flat, and, for the grand finale, pulled a hairdryer from her pocket and blasted the remains with hot air. She stood there, watching the snow melt into the ground, victorious. I stood in my living room, fists clenched, heart pounding. Who does that? The next morning, I found a letter taped to my door. Dear homeowner, as per HOA regulations, all unauthorized yard decorations must be removed within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in fines. Signed, Eleanor Whitmore, HOA President 1 Problem. There was no HOA. Our neighborhood had voted against 1 year ago. But Eleanor? She had been running a fraudulent operation, scamming new homeowners into paying her dues, issuing fake violation notices, and bullying anyone who didn't submit to her imaginary authority. I wasn't going to let her win. That same afternoon, I rebuilt my snowman, bigger, stronger, standing defiantly against the bitter wind. I reinforced it with ice and packed the snow so tight it was nearly solid. And I waited. Sure enough, night 2, 11:47 p.m. On the dot, Eleanor returned. This time she came armed, with a shovel. I watched in disbelief as she swung at my snowman like some kind of deranged snow archaeologist, digging and hacking until there was nothing left. She left another fake violation notice, as if daring me to fight back. I clenched the paper in my fist. Oh, Eleanor, you have no idea who you're messing with. The next morning, my front door wasn't just taped with another notice. It was plastered with them. One on the door, one on the mailbox, one stapled to my wooden fence. She wanted to intimidate me. She wanted a battle? Fine. But I wasn't just going to rebuild my snowman. I was going to turn it into a fortress. I wasn't just going to rebuild my snowman. I was going to create an unbreakable monument of revenge. First, I needed a core that wouldn't crumble under a kick, a shovel, or even a blowtorch. So I drove to the hardware store and found my secret weapon, a reinforced steel drum. It was heavy, nearly indestructible, and perfect for what I had in mind. Next, I needed something solid. I mixed quickset concrete and poured it inside the drum, letting it harden into a 300-pound rock-solid core. Step 3. Camouflage. I layered thick, compacted snow over the drum, sculpting it into the perfect shape. I even dusted the surface with fresh powder so it looked just as soft and harmless as before. But I wasn't done. Eleanor had escalated to using a shovel and a hairdryer. I had to be ready for her next move, so I sprayed the entire snowman with water, letting it freeze into a rock-hard ice shell. Any attempt to punch, kick, or even stab it would result in numb fingers and bruised knuckles. Then, the final touch, a hidden surprise. I knew Eleanor's favorite weapon when she really wanted to make a point. Her SUV. She had done it before, knocking over trash cans, running over flower pots, even once accidentally bumping into a neighbor's mailbox. So, just in case she decided to escalate again, I secured the snowman to the ground with a buried metal pole and placed a few discreet bricks at the base. If she rammed it, she wasn't just going to be surprised. She was going to be paying for it. That night, I sat inside, hot cocoa in hand, watching through my security cameras. And right on schedule, 11:47 p.m., Eleanor arrived. Only this time, she didn't bother with the shovel. She sat behind the wheel of her SUV, headlights glaring at my snowman like a predator eyeing its prey. I leaned forward. "Oh, you wouldn't." She revved the engine. "Oh, you absolutely would." Then, with one final scream of engine fury, Eleanor floored it. The SUV roared as Eleanor slammed her foot on the gas, charging toward my innocent-looking snowman like a medieval battering ram. For a split second, I wondered if she'd lose her nerve. She didn't. Boom. The sound was glorious. The SUV collided head-on with my snowman, the front bumper crumpling like an accordion. The hood folded inward, the radiator exploded, and a thick cloud of steam and smoke billowed into the cold night air. Metal groaned. Fluids leaked onto the snow. And the best part? My snowman didn't even budge. From my window, I could see Eleanor's expression shift from smug determination to absolute horror. She stumbled out of the driver's seat, eyes darting between her wrecked SUV and the perfectly intact snowman. She looked like she had just witnessed black magic. I couldn't resist. I stepped outside, mug of hot cocoa in hand, leaning casually against my doorframe. "Something wrong, Eleanor?" I called out. She spun to face me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You set me up!" I took a slow sip. "Eleanor, it's just a snowman." Her face turned red with rage. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You booby-trapped it! That's illegal!" I raised an eyebrow. "It's literally just snow, Eleanor. You ran over a pile of frozen water. If anyone here broke the law, it's the person who just committed vehicular assault on my lawn." And then, as if the night couldn't get any better, sirens echoed in the distance. Her eyes widened as 2 police cruisers pulled up, red and blue lights flashing across the snow. Officer Grant and Officer Ramirez stepped out, taking in the scene. The steaming, wrecked SUV, the still-standing snowman, and Eleanor, whose face had now turned a very satisfying shade of pale. Grant took off his hat and sighed. "I swear, Eleanor, every time we get a call about this street, you're involved." Ramirez tilted his head, trying and failing to hide his amusement. "Let me get this straight. You ran your car into his yard and hit a snowman?" Eleanor, still shaking with rage, pointed at me. "He trapped it. He put cement inside. He did this on purpose. Grant turned to me. Sir, is this true? I smiled. Officer, it's just a snowman. You can check the footage if you'd like. Eleanor's head snapped up. Footage? I nodded toward my security cameras. They've been rolling all week. Every time you came to destroy my snowman, I have it all recorded, including tonight. Eleanor visibly swallowed. Grant sighed again. Well, this just got interesting. Eleanor froze as Officer Grant walked up to my porch. Mind if we take a look at that footage? I didn't mind at all. I led the officers inside while Eleanor stood outside, shifting nervously on her feet. It was over. She knew it. She had no way out. As the footage played, the officers watched in dead silence. There she was, kicking, stomping, smashing my snowman. There she was, waving her fake HOA notices around like some suburban dictator. And finally, there she was, intentionally flooring her SUV straight into my lawn. Officer Ramirez chuckled. This is some next-level crazy. Officer Grant didn't laugh. He turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, this is reckless driving, destruction of property, and trespassing. And considering you've been distributing fake HOA fines, we might be looking at fraud charges too. Eleanor's face drained of all color. No, this is a mistake. She tried to regain control, waving her hands like she was addressing a boardroom instead of two unimpressed officers. I am the president of this community. I have the right to enforce rules. Grant folded his arms. Funny. The city says this neighborhood doesn't have an HOA. Her mouth snapped shut. Ramirez pulled out a notepad. Just to be clear, ma'am, you've been collecting HOA fees from homeowners, correct? Eleanor visibly flinched. Well, yes, but... Grant raised a hand. And issuing violation fines? She swallowed hard. Technically. Ramirez scribbled something down. Interesting, because that sounds an awful lot like fraud. Eleanor lost it. You can't do this. I'll sue. Grant sighed. Ma'am, you just drove a 2-ton vehicle into a pile of ice and cement. You don't have much of a case here. And then, as if the night couldn't get any better, my neighbor Mike appeared. Hey, officers, thought you might like to see this. He held up a letter. A brand new, freshly printed notice from Eleanor's fake HOA, demanding $300 from every household to compensate for damages sustained by the HOA president's vehicle. Eleanor had actually tried to make the neighborhood pay for the car she totaled on my snowman. Grant snatched the paper and stared at it. Then he turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, you're under investigation for fraud. You might want to start calling a lawyer. Eleanor screeched. You can't do this. Ramirez clicked his pen shut. We're not doing anything. You did this to yourself. I took a long, slow sip of hot chocolate, savoring the moment. For the next few days, Eleanor went into full meltdown mode. She tried everything to regain control, posting new HOA rules around the neighborhood, sending out last-minute violation fines, and even threatening homeowners with fake legal action. But this time, nobody listened. Word had already spread about her fraud investigation. The entire community had turned against her. People ripped down her notices, blocked her number, and even reported her threats to the city. And then, the final bombshell dropped. On a freezing Monday morning, I stepped outside to shovel my driveway and saw a fleet of government and police vehicles pulling onto Eleanor's street. 3 marked city cars, 1 police cruiser, 2 representatives from the bank. Oh, this was big. I set my shovel down and pulled out my phone. Within minutes, the entire neighborhood was watching. Eleanor must have seen the officials approaching because her front door suddenly flew open. She stepped outside, hair a mess, robe flapping, slippers barely hanging on. She was already screaming, "I did nothing wrong!" The lead investigator, a woman in a sharp navy coat, didn't even flinch. She held up a thick stack of documents. "Ma'am, we have multiple reports of fraudulent financial activity under your name." Eleanor froze. That's ridiculous," she stammered. "You can't just accuse me." The investigator cut her off. "Actually, we can, and we did. After reviewing your records, we found a history of illegally collected payments, false legal documents, and unreported income." She flipped through the papers. "Which means you're being investigated for fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion." My eyes widened. Tax evasion. Oh, this was better than Christmas morning. Eleanor's entire body locked up. No, this is a mistake." Officer Grant stepped forward, arms crossed. "Ma'am, you also have an outstanding mortgage balance. Due to unpaid debts tied to your fraudulent HOA collections, the bank has foreclosed on your property." Eleanor staggered back. You can't take my house." The investigator didn't blink. "You have 30 minutes to vacate." The crowd gasped. Eleanor's face cycled through every stage of grief in real time: denial, anger, bargaining. But nobody stepped up to help her. Because after years of terrorizing the neighborhood, scamming people out of their money, and bullying families with fake rules, nobody felt sorry for her. And me? I just sipped my hot chocolate, watching as justice unfolded. For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor fought like a cornered animal. She pleaded, threatened, even screamed at the officials as they carried boxes of paperwork and financial records out of her house. But the worst part? They weren't just taking documents. They were taking everything. Her furniture, her appliances, even her ridiculous HOA president coffee mug. Everything she had built from her years of scamming the neighborhood was being seized for auction. And then, the final humiliation arrived. A tow truck. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand, staring at Eleanor's battered, steam-billowing SUV. "Is this the vehicle in question?" he asked the officer. Grant nodded. "Yep. It was used in the commission of reckless driving and property damage. It's part of the financial seizure." Eleanor's face turned white. "No, that's my car. You can't—" But before she could finish, the chains hooked onto her SUV. With a whining screech of metal, the tow truck hauled away her once pristine vehicle. And just like that, Eleanor had nothing left. The investigator handed her one final envelope. "This is your official eviction notice. If you return to this property after today, you will be arrested for trespassing." Eleanor's fingers trembled as she clutched the paper, her entire empire crumbling before her eyes. And then, the most poetic moment of all. She turned to leave and had to walk past my snowman. Still standing, unmoved, indestructible. I couldn't resist. I called out to her with a grin. "See you next winter, Eleanor." Her hands clenched into fists. She opened her mouth to scream, then stopped. Because what could she do? Nothing. So she turned and walked away. No house, no car, no fake HOA. She was nothing now. And as she disappeared down the snowy road, the entire neighborhood erupted into applause. Eleanor Whitmore was gone. And peace? Peace had finally returned to Maplewood Hills. That winter, my snowman stood tall until March. Neighbors took pictures with it. Kids played around it. And every time I walked outside, I couldn't help but smile. Because my snowman wasn't just a pile of ice and snow. It was a monument. a testament to standing up to bullies, to refusing to be intimidated, and to fighting back the right way. See, Eleanor didn't lose because I fought her head on. She lost because she destroyed herself. People like Eleanor thrive on control. They push boundaries, demand obedience, and expect you to fold. They use fear, manipulation, and fake authority to get their way. But the truth? They only win if you let them. You don't always have to fight back with fists or anger. Sometimes you just have to stand your ground and let the weight of their own actions crush them. And that's exactly what happened. She broke every rule, took every risk, and dug her own grave. And me? I just built a snowman. This story isn't just about a rogue HOA Karen. It's about dealing with toxic people in everyday life. Bullies exist everywhere. They're at work, in your neighborhood, even online. They thrive on making others feel powerless. But if you stay calm, document everything, and let the truth do the work, they will self-destruct every time. So next time you're dealing with a power-hungry tyrant, remember this. You don't need to fight every battle. You just need to outlast your enemies. And sometimes, all it takes is a reinforced snowman.